and I will attempt to enunciate as clearly as possible. I'm calling the Monday, August 30, 2021, a meeting of the Ojai Building Appeals Board to order at 5 o'clock. Can we get a roll call, please?
Chair Ulrich.
Present.
Vice Chair Farmer.
Here.
Board Member Hanson. Here. Board Member Daddy.
Here.
Board Member Rolay.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, can I get Vice Chair to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, public communications is the time set aside during the Building Appeals Board meeting for members of the public to address the Building Appeals Board on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the board and will generally be referred to staff and/or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting. Do we have public communications this evening? Speaker cards, Cheryl? Very good. Okay. In that case, we will move to the consent item, which is the minutes of the special meeting of the Building Appeals Board, dated August 9, 2021. Recommendation: approve as submitted. Do we have any comments regarding our past minutes? Hearing none, I think we get a roll call on that as well.
Ulrich.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Daddy.
Yes.
Rolay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Our second discussion item, item number 2, which is the first discussion item, is continued from the August 9, 2021 meeting, which is review fire hardening improvement options. Recommendation is provide a recommendation to City Council for additional fire hardening options, and I think we've made some efforts to compiling our thoughts on that with the intent of developing a resolution that we can forward to the City Council at this meeting. So having started with that introduction, shall we discuss? Or do we have any particular items or issues relative to this item that any of the board would like to comment? Dale?
Yes. You know, there's quite a list of things we can do to make our community safer for fire. And, you know, there's anything, I mean, I think there are 10 or 11 that we could consider. I don't know that, what I'm wondering is if we should pick out the ones that are most important that can be done rather quickly or easily and be code enforcement. An example would be clearing any, there's wood chips all throughout the city. That's a fire danger. I know they serve a purpose for keeping the trees moist, and that is important, but we also don't want the city to burn down. There are wood chips, there are dead trees, I mean, I sit and look out the window at my office and I see bamboo across the parking lot that's all dried out. It's things like that that need to be tackled, I think, first, because that's where in a fire, that's where the wind would blow it. I mean, I'm just throwing that out as an idea to choose those items that we think are the most important. And I'm open to anyone else that has other suggestions. There are others that we can talk about.
Okay. Next. Bob.
Yeah, we have stuff ready to burn everywhere. What I did out of frustration is I went ahead and called SCE and reported a couple of trees, the one on Topa Topa between Western Pacific Bank and Barbara Bowman's fence line. We have an agreement with SCE that they'll remove all of these trees that are distressed, dead, falling. We're going to get these falling trees with the wind. They're going to take out a power line. We're going to have spark. We're going to have fire. I think it's very vigilant. We need to be very vigilant. The other tree we have is, unfortunately, it's on Kenyatta and Elisa, or it's Matilaha. It's in front of the Livingston Memorial. It's a giant tree, and it's growing right in between the lines. What I would suggest is that the city do what it can do first where it has absolute authority. I listened to Mr. Wyrick saying that we've got a conjunctive problem with what's outside the city and what's inside the city. We haven't been able to attract anybody outside the city for years to do anything. I called our fire protection district 4 months ago and asked for some help in trying to come up with the program to start the Arundel removal. It's 4 months now. So what I would like to suggest is that the city come up with a list, or we come up with a list of items that the city has the absolute authority to do, and they failed to do for 4 years. They failed over and over and over again. We have the same discussions about the invasive trees, what should be gone. We have a continued discussion about having SCE trim or remove the invasives under the power lines. They're going to have to trim them every year, every 2 years. We're never going to get rid of that fire hazard. And the city needs to get a new program or adopt a different attitude when they go to SCE and say, we'll be willing to take certain trees out. We'll be willing to take certain hazards out, because they never go away. They just mitigate them for a year or two. They come back. The city doesn't have the proper code language that it needs to enforce yard maintenance, hazardous material buildup, clearance, the rubble that we have. We have to have the city go ahead and restructure that enables our code people to come in. It's really just maintenance and garbage and trash and weeds and leaves, and we don't have the proper language we need. And that's easy for the city to do. The city doesn't have to do anything except look to themselves, get 3 votes, and make these things happen and start mitigating these things. I think the other thing is then we're going to have to sit and come up with some ideas for code changes. When I look at one of our founding people's old house on the corner of Signal and Aliso, there's a foot of leaves in the rain gutters, and it's stacked up. And then when we take a look at the trees are growing right over the top of the fireplaces. The spark arresters don't exist. The homes are so old. We don't have screens that go over the roof attic vents. We don't have screens that go on the vents that vent below raised foundation. So there's a ton of things we can do. We've made a lot of suggestions. But picking the most important, I'd say it's, we've got to stop dumping these wood chips, and we've got to do the debris removal, because those things are going to burn. They're going to blow. They're going to become more fuel for the embers, and it's going to spread out the entire city. So I think the first recommendation is the city needs to take a look at what they're doing about cleaning up the hazards first, because I don't really know that the city is going to want to enforce, like I got the sanitary district to do, which was a camera through every lateral every time there was a transference. I don't know that the city is going to want to demand that there are screens, that there's alarms, that there are new spark arresters, that we no longer have plastic skylights. I mean, we've come up with an awful lot of things that have kind of been changed in the code, but they never get changed on the home. And so when we have that sale, then there needs to be a list of a half a dozen or more things that get upgraded prior to the transference of that property. And again, that's a city council issue. That's not complicated. It's not hard to do. It's just a matter of listing it and taking a vote and putting it into force. And that's the easiest way.
Can I say something?
And then one of the more difficult is going to be the permits. And it's going to be what you want to have permit, how you come up with the threshold, what's reasonable. to retrofit at that time. And we don't want people spending thousands of dollars for tiny little permits. That's not reasonable. It shouldn't be burdensome, and it shouldn't be aggressive and abusive. It should be some things that are small things that can be done. So I think what we need to do is take a look at this. We've got some hard ones. Chief Roper came up with some hard ones, and I looked at that and I rolled my eyes and I said, wow, I don't know what we're going to do on this one. The new recommendation is to have no flammable structural material within 5 feet. That means that you're not going to have your gate nailed against your house. When the gate burns, it burns your house. Or where you have the fence coming in, it's nailed up against the house, and then the fence burns. And so that is going to take an action by the city council to get in and understand it and figure out how much benefit that's really going to bring, because I think a number of these items are going to have a pretty good pushback. But that's a place to start, and I think that the invasive tree removal on all city property, all the hazards on city property, is something that can be done with no permission from any outside agency. City property, they've got control over it, so it would be best to have them start with the property that's the easement, the right-of-way, and the city property first.
So is that a recommendation that we're making, is that the city remove all invasive trees on city property?
On city property, and have SCE come up with a policy to remove rather than trim those trees that are hazardous and that are fire prone.
Just remove them, don't just trim them. Get rid of them because they're going to grow back.
It's kind of like the Greenville fire where they incinerated the entire northern area of California, where they said, gee, we were going to underground the line but didn't get around to it. Well, they're going to be back to trim the trees one of these days. I want to make sure it's not, but we didn't get around to it because it wasn't on our schedule.
Okay.
So if they're Mexican fan palms, if they're other invasives, if there are other things we know we don't need, they really just need to be taken down.
So you called SCE and asked about correcting any, you called SCE today
I called SCE last week and
to get rid of all
gave them the addresses of 2 trees that were hazardous to
Okay.
remove.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'll follow up on that. I'll send a report to the city manager saying I called, here's who I talked to, here's when I talked. And then we can follow up on the progress. And then if I don't see any progress, I can call SCE back again
Okay.
and say, you know, I reported this thing a couple of weeks ago and here's what's going on. I mean, these things are dead. They're
Okay.
rust color. They're a rust brown color. They're gone.
So that's a recommendation that we're making, is that the city, I just want to make it clear because I'm trying to take notes. I know what we're recommending. We're recommending that the city remove all invasive trees on city property and that they contact SCE and remove trees on city property.
No, well, under the power line. That's a different
Right,
issue. Under the power easement. And they have told us that they'll do that. That will save us hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars
Okay.
by having SCE bear the burden while they're still offering to do that. That program won't go on forever, probably. So we need to get this thing done. Fire season is closer every single day.
Okay.
Okay. Anything you want to?
You know, today I spoke at length with one of the captains, Raul Garcia, over at Station 21, and I'd spoken previously with Captain White at Station 21, and it was interesting. I'm sure my fellow board members are already familiar with this fire hazard reduction program. I wasn't, frankly, but it seems almost to mirror the 10-point list that we have here in terms of fundamental, safety hardening opportunities, and it seems to be working. It's proven a model for other communities, across the country, and I just wonder, given, it focuses purely on the perimeter, which is clearly important, right? We back up to the wilderness. But the interior is equally important. And I'm just wondering if a program similar to what the county already has in place would work, implemented by the city, which would essentially require, I'm not sure, again, I'm sure you guys are familiar, but there's an annual inspection. Homes are identified as problematic. The people are told you have to do all of the things on the list, which are pretty basic. Clear your gutter, remove flammable items, put the right mesh screens, the spark arresters, etc. And they have a period of time within which to comply. If they don't, a contractor comes in, takes care of the work, and the homeowner's billed for the work. If they don't pay the bill, there's a lien on their taxes. I mean, it's one of those things. Hopefully it wouldn't get to that point. But I just wonder, if we have a successful model already in existence for the perimeter, why wouldn't we deploy a similar program for the interior? And it seems, again, it's working. There are some cases, according to these captains I spoke to, where people are, slow to respond, maybe a bit resistant, but they eventually comply. And it's for everyone's good. And it occurs to me also that, this is something that a lot of people will want. I would want it. I would love to have an expert come to my home, do a routine inspection, and inform me. Say, Mr. Rollet, you've got this, you've got that, you've got this. If you want to optimize the potential safety for yourself, your family, your neighbors, the rest of the community, do the following things. I'd be on it in a second. And by the way, I wouldn't have a problem paying for that service. I wouldn't have a problem paying for that expert inspection and that expert opinion. And I'm just wondering if it could be as simple as that. Again, I've never done this before, but it would seem to me a program that the city puts into place where I like the idea of, hey, we have to maybe sort of implement in stages, so that instead of creating this overall mandate that burdens everyone in the community, possibly it's, hey, if you get pull a permit for this amount of money is recommended in here, automatically, yeah, we'll issue the permit, but you're also going to pay this fee, and you're going to have an inspection, which will at some point be mandatory for everyone in the community. But because you're pulling a permit, you're making improvements, the time is now. You're going to pay this fee, we're going to send an inspector out, and you're going to get an inspection, and you're going to know, you can check in online as to whether you've passed or not, or if the title to your home transfers. I think those are two great triggers to get people on board, and eventually it becomes a mandatory policy that the city can implement, and it just seems to make sense. And I really don't think we'd have a lot of resistance to something like that. And again, I love the opportunity to model ourselves after something that's already in place and clearly already working. Of course the perimeter needs to be defended, but so too does the interior. It only takes one house. So I just wonder how closely we've looked at that, and possibly just taking the simple route to implementing something identical or very similar to what's already in place and working, and applying it to the interior.
Yeah, I was looking through something that Malibu had put out here. They call it Malibu Prepares for 2021 Wildfire Season with National Preparedness Month events throughout September. It says, as California battles some of the largest wildfires in its history and braces for another extremely dangerous fire season this fall, the city of Malibu is getting ready and helping residents be more prepared with National Preparedness Month throughout September. They actually put out a pamphlet. It's called National Preparedness Month of 2021. They say the next catastrophic wildfire is always around the corner, so we can't let up in our efforts towards community-wide preparedness so that we can protect lives, homes in our community and be more resilient when the fire does strike. They also actually have seminars that they put on. The city will provide a free virtual training for seniors 55 years and older, and at-risk adults about how to prepare and respond to public safety power shutoffs. I think the whole key is just public awareness of this. September the 7th, the city will send a citywide test message using the Everbridge disaster notification system, which the city has been using for several years. Residents do not have to register to participate. The 23rd, they have a fire safety liaison that comes out. They do have somebody, really, like you were saying, that actually will come to the house and do a fire assessment for hardening and what have you. But, I was talking about over 50% of the homes are from embers, I guess. So that has to do with what Bob has to say, about the trees and the gutters and this and that. But I just think we need to we're coming into September. I talked to Captain Tony McHale yesterday. I met with him, and he says, man, we're gearing up for it. It's not, it's just when it's going to happen. It's, we're due, we're overdue. And I think there's people sitting out there, in the community right now that just seem to think that's not going to happen to us. So.
My question is, how did those two comments integrate into what our task is, as in make recommendations to council? So
I would recommend passing an ordinance to require people in town that when they pull a permit, start there. We again phase it in. So start with anyone pulling a permit over X number of dollars, whatever that number is. I'm sure we can have a discussion about what makes the most sense. You pull that permit, yes, we'll issue the permit, but you're automatically also going to pay for a fire safety inspection. It's mandatory. You get the inspection, you'll get a list of the things you have to do to comply. You have a certain period of time within which to comply. If you don't, we send a contractor out, we fix it, you pay. If you don't, we put a lien on your house or whatever. Sounds, maybe a bit rough. But this is important. I mean, the more I think about this, this is incredibly important. We don't need to look very far to see examples of disasters. And I think we need to do everything we possibly can to prepare, not out of fear or panic, but just out of, good caution and diligence. So to me, again, I've never done this before, but I like to find the beeline to solutions. And for me, it's pretty straightforward. I'm looking at a list of 10 items. They seem pretty easy. They don't seem arduous or overreaching. Seems pretty simple. And I think it could possibly even be a revenue stream for the city, quite frankly. Why not pay for the service? Again, as a homeowner, been here for quite a while, I would happily pay to have an expert come to inspect my home and tell me what I need to do to optimize fire safety. So that's a recommendation for me as a novice. I would try to keep it as simple as possible and actually get something done on this.
Okay, but do you have a specific exemplar of the county's program?
The county's program, from what I've gleaned, is very similar in terms of the 10-point bullet list to what we have here in this document. From what I understand, again, there's a period, right? So they start, notices are sent via mail around April 20th. The deadline is June 1st, and it's a pretty simple program. Now, they're going along on the perimeter. They used Google or drones or whatever to identify the specific properties along the perimeter. And they have a very simple program in place. From what I understand, it's been highly efficient, again, has served as a model for other communities throughout the country. It seems efficient, it seems simple enough, and I would try to mirror that as closely as possible and implement a similar program for the interior.
Okay. From my perspective, to make make a point here, in this recommendation, fire seasons is not any longer, and I think most fire agencies would agree with this. If it's not de facto all year long, it certainly isn't 1 June anymore. This would have it at 1 April, which means notices would go out 1 March. I don't even think that's ahead of the curve anymore. So if I foresee some resistance or some confusion perhaps about the recommendation to adopt what the county does, because oftentimes the county's programs are county specific given it's unincorporated. I think we can assimilate some of those elements into our own, but the purpose of this meeting here isn't to enlarge things further. It's to condense, define, and render a list of recommendations so we can at least get that started. Then obviously the council has to determine what they want to do. And if we want to suggest that they consider adopting the county program, I'm fine with putting that as an additional bullet.
Well, my understanding, frankly, is that yes, it's the county that has implemented the program, but it also encompasses homes within city limits. It's not just unincorporated Ventura County.
It's supposed to be, but and we've had representatives of County Fire and CAL FIRE here, and everybody basically said, all of them, and I believe, well, we'll ask our building official, but was that the city, through its building department and whatever other enforcement code compliance, is responsible for whatever the city chooses to do, whether it's utilize and implement and enforce the county program or develop our own. So the disconnect to date has been, there has not been a city program. There has not been enforcement or adoption of the county program. Oftentimes the city, on the city's public property, has been in violation. So kind of doesn't make it real easy for the city to enforce anything when they aren't taking care of their own house, so to speak. Now, some of those things have changed somewhat. I don't know if Bob spends more time out in the field looking at hazards than I say most people in the city, because he's observing for a variety of reasons this sort of thing, the insurance business, concern for the community. And the reality of the situation is, I would say, Bob, would you say that the city's in compliance with fire, with the counties? I'm talking about the city, with city public property.
If we get into the 100-foot clearance, defensible space, a few of those other items that we wish to have, no, we've got all kinds of problems. There's all kinds of improvements that we can make.
Okay. So it's one thing to have a program, but I'm looking at things personally from the practical aspect of whether it's going to be enforced, whether it's enforceable, whether it's something that will have buy-in from the community, and whether we actually do it. And what we've been tasked with is generating, and bear in mind, we did this, I won't call it an exercise, although I was tempted to. We did this process 4 years ago. Essentially, we're making the same recommendations with a couple of additions, very important additions, that we made 4 years ago. And from my observation is, I don't believe that any of them were adopted as far as policy by the city.
Well, that seems to be where the disconnect is. I mean, so to me, I mean, again, I don't know what the process is. I see a list here of 10 items. They seem pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It seems we have to make a recommendation, something clear. I don't necessarily advocate duplicating the county's program, but I would say modeling after a proven successful program would make sense to me. And, you know, as far as how we implement and enforce, or frankly, whether we get, the community to embrace or adopt the concept, I mean, there are plenty of things that, people don't necessarily embrace or adopt initially. Helmets on motorcycles, seat belts,
no
as an
smoking
example.
Indoors.
Exactly.
Right?
So, I mean, what we're here for, I think, is to do what's best for the community. And we're in a position to inspire changes, make changes in the best interest of the community. To me, it's less an issue of whether they adopt it or not, more an issue of if it makes sense, if it's practical, if it's efficient. And so, again, I'd have to defer to you, the rest of my board members here, in terms of the process, because I don't have the experience. But it sure seems to me like a pretty straightforward opportunity.
You're asking for an inspector.
Sorry?
What I understand you're asking for is an inspector.
Yeah.
And
someone-
what we ask to have inspected might be over and above what the county's doing, because that's on the perimeter.
Could be, but it doesn't seem that way.
Well, I
And-
mean, I don't think they would do like the skylights. Are they going to make us take down, replace the plastic with glass? Are they going to make us do the vents around the top?
I think so. I think some of
that's
those are
all
very
included?
similar items, yeah, for compliance with their program. I don't want to speak out of turn. I haven't had a chance to review it or peruse it entirely. But the spirit of cooperation, support that I got from the people I spoke with, it would seem to me they would be open. They're not in a position to say yes for sure, but they would train. They'd be happy to say, here's the best method for training these people to go out and handle these inspections. I mean, there are experts that do this stuff. I don't think it's rocket science. You know, you have a 10-point checklist. You either tick the box or you don't, and if you don't, you fix it.
Well, we've been going over, we went over this in 2017, I believe it was, when we went over this. And what's been done with our recommendation to the council?
Well, I'm not aware of anything having been done,
Right.
but I'm not,
So is anybody?
perhaps I could have missed something. So, just to, we're adding, proposal right now is to make these recommendations of the bullet points that are on the agenda, and then add, so far, 3 adds. One is add, and language can get modified somewhat, add a recommendation that SEC, Southern California Edison, to remove all invasives and hazardous conditions beneath their power lines throughout the city. Does that condense it well enough? Okay. Then next is add city to model its fire hazard reduction program after the existing Ventura County program.
That's currently protecting the perimeter.
Right. And then the third is add the city to engage community and communicate to community the hazard reduction program that council ultimately adopts. In other words, not just adopt it and it goes through the formalities, but actually have some means of communicating this is what we're doing as a community. And these are what the impacts are going to be, and these are what the intentions are. Okay, is that?
Maybe a fourth item, the wood chips.
I've got at
The
least
wood
a third
chips.
of a page of white here, so keep going.
Well, just the wood chips. I don't think I see it here in the list of 10, but I think it's a good point. I may have missed it.
Well, that's, it wasn't too specific there relative to the strict enforcement of combustible fuel clearance.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
That would include that.
Chips, mulch, whatever you want to call it, are highly flammable.
Agreed.
Especially when they dry out a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, do we have any other?
Chair, we have in the past about 3 or 4 times with relative success, if we want to say. We have targeted certain items, and we've sent out some really nice postcards, and we've got them archived. Fences, hedges, and walls, and we sent out a number of really fancy little postcards. I think what we need to do is you need to do a message to the community, and the community message needs to be, if you're planning or contemplating if we can get some of these actually adopted by the council, if you're planning or contemplating selling your home, give people a heads up that these are some of the items that will need to be in compliance before you can transfer title, which will be no more plastic skylights. You've got to have the screens. You've got to do other things, and put those in. Give people lots of time. Where they get angry and all this is when they get something smacked up the side of the head. You know, it throws a monkey wrench in the sale. They didn't have time to do it. They've got time constraints. And so, you know, we get out in front of it and let everybody know that, hey, we did that once before. And one of the things we did before was we had people coming up and putting up giant walls on their property, and then the city would have to take them to task and sue them, have really nasty discussions with individuals, make them take the fence down. And what I always thought was when somebody moves here and they buy a home, they get a little packet that says, you must get a zone clearance before you do anything. And we do that now, I think. And just let people know ahead of time what they're in for, because when they get mousetrapped, it's a drag. You know, they spend money, they do the wrong thing, they didn't know, and when they do know, they can choose to ignore it, and the city can take its appropriate action, or they can choose to plan and go ahead and do it. So.
It's a little
notification-
like a termite inspection after all, really. I mean, right? You're going to sell your house, you have to have an inspection. Often the cost is negotiated at closing and the buyer picks it up. It's not the end of the world. And, once again, I think it benefits buyer, seller, and everyone around them.
At this point, is there any public comment?
Yes, we have 3 public comment cards. The first is Wayne Maynard.
Good evening. Wayne Maynard, 609 Gridley Road. And when you're looking for things to kind of the low-hanging fruit, I think one would be to amend your building code to allow for requiring retrofitting, building hardening that's currently required in the California Building Code and the city code for additions. So right now, if somebody does an addition to their house, the only thing they have to fire harden is the addition. It doesn't make a lot of sense to put double pane windows perhaps on the addition only, but not on the window next to it. So I think you could look at an ordinance, might say you would take 25% of the value of the addition, and that has to be applied to hardening other portions of the house, something like that. I think that's the way to start getting some of that stuff done. With regards to what you were referring to earlier is the county ordinance. I think you were probably referring to the Fire Protection District ordinance, which is our fire department, and it does apply everywhere within the fire district, which includes the city areas of the Ojai Valley, and it's applied to anywhere within 500 feet of the wildland area. So I think it would be appropriate as well to develop some type of a property maintenance ordinance for the interiors and look at some of the key things that would allow embers to where they would ignite, take care of dead grass, leaves, in gutters, things like that. That would be some type of a property maintenance ordinance. Thank you.
Wayne, before you leave, is there some type of is there somewhere where we can go and we can get an index, some type of format that says these are the 5 most beneficial things to fire hardening for the money? Dual glazed windows, get this done, get this done, get this done. Is there something that maybe will give us a list of 5 or so retrofit items that are really a must, and then give us the bang for the buck so we can go ahead and consider those and recommend those as changes? I mean, if I truly knew, I don't know, but if I truly knew the benefit, cost benefit of dual glazed windows, which I know are enormous, I just don't know what the cost,
Correct.
ratio and benefit.
I think I've seen some things like that before, like where to start, where to put your money at. I can do some research on it for you if you'd like.
I would love it. That would be very, very, very helpful, and
I think
we
sometimes
could
it also
incorporate that.
involves maybe just a consultation. Like we tell them how much money they have to put in, and maybe a consultation with the building official and maybe a fire official, a city planner, somebody that would look at the property and evaluate what would be best for that property. Because I think sometimes it's more property specific, what might be beneficial and what might not be.
And if you have some ideas on commercial, commercial's huge, and we've got lots and lots of improvements on commercial. So if you have some ideas on commercial, that would also be appreciated. Again, we lost Santa Rosa. Why? Well, we lost Santa Rosa because the air intake on the Walmart brought the embers into the store, and it caught the store on fire, it burned it down. When Walmart went, it took an 8-inch main that took all the pressure out of the entire water system. We lost, 8,000 homes up there. So looking at the homes is great, but we have a lot of commercial property here that could use a lot of hardening too.
We do, but I think that our biggest conflagration potential is in the residential areas.
Okay, anything you can come up with a recommendation, we would certainly like to take a look at and appreciate.
Okay, next public comment.
We have Bill Miley.
Hi. For the record, my name is Bill Miley. I have a few comments about the list, but just to begin with, it seems to me that the recommendations, some of them especially, have to do with the day-by-day character of our community. And shade coverage is really important, especially in this area. And so, from my point of view, a city with lots of plants and trees is very important to me. And so I see some of these things, cutting them down and moving them out and creating a desert between the house. Anyway, that really kind of bothers me. Another one is we have a landscaping ordinance that I don't hear you talking about that guides shrubs and trees and where they can be and what they can be and such. Maybe that's something that we should pay more attention to. Number 3 is, I see the big issue in all of this is the wildfire fuel reduction. So I'm looking up on towards Nordoff Peak, and there's hardly anything up there right now to burn. At least it appears to be. So that seems to me that we need to really put a lot of effort into that. Beyond just hardening the city, if we don't have the fuel, we don't have the embers, we don't have the fires. 4 is, I understand that wildfire heat can go up into the 1100 and 1200 degrees, and some houses don't burn, they explode, and then they burn. So that leads me to number 5, which is the value of protective gel sprayed on a structure to keep the heat out. Several years ago, I bought Barricade, 4 gallons of Barricade, which I can apply with a hose to my house, which will also reduce the heat so it won't burn. And I do understand that there's several insurance companies now that include in their homeowners policies a service where a company will come out and stand by, spray your house, and protect it from burning if they have enough trucks. And just a couple more here. So here's a question. What is a combustible fuel source? So I have a nice, big, huge stone pine. It's like 60 feet tall. And I know that it's pretty hydrated because when I bend the needles, they don't crack. So is that a combustible fuel source? I would like your board to discuss what's a combustible fuel source when I'm finished. 8, we already have fire notices from the fire department. They come out and they say, clean all the brush, cut it down, da-dum, and I do that every year. Another one is, we want, at least I think we do, a high percentage of shade coverage in our city. Palo Alto has a kind of a guideline and ordinance. They have like 70% shade in their city, and I think we should have that too. And then the issue of decks. Any deck over 18 inches above the existing ground has to be skirted. That would be terrible. Decks are gorgeous and they're beautiful and they have space underneath them. We have lots of those in our city, and I just don't like that idea at all. I know the talk is that it keeps the fuel from coming, or the fire from coming in and burning up through, but there has to be other ways. I like Monterey pines. We have a lot of trees in our city that are treasured, that aren't necessarily historical or protected. And I hope that we can protect those too. So question, what is a combustible fuel source and how do you tell it's combustible if you don't put a match to it? Okay.
Bill, if you want an answer, if you're afraid to put a match to it, then you know it is combustible. And when you can bust the needles by your hand, then you know that's combustible.
But Bill, can I comment on something? We're not against shade. What we're saying is that anything above your roof, you can have a tree above your roof, but clearance at least 10 feet of branches that over it. So the tree can still be there giving you shade. It's just that the branches aren't coming down close to your roof line. That was the main thing.
And the fireplace.
And the fireplace. Yeah, that, you don't, well, that's good, you don't,
So
but,
what's a combustible fuel source? How do you tell?
well, wood chips for one, dead trees, dead plants around your place. Anything I mean, it's pretty obvious if you have a lot of dead trees, dead branches, debris in your yard, logs stacked up, but that, all of that will burn. You know that it will. I don't think
No
it,
problem there. But what about Monterey pines and eucalyptus trees? We have some gorgeous ones up on Signal Street.
yes, we,
They're all alive.
yeah, they're all alive. Well, I guess if they're alive, they're okay, but eucalyptus is not, it's not indigenous to this area. And so that's a consideration. They will go up with a giant fire. They will go up.
And I think a lot has to do with temperature, actual heat of the fire. I think pretty much anything will burn if it gets hot enough. So yeah, there's a lot of combustible material that's going to resist, fire. I'm no expert, but I did talk to a couple, and temperature has a lot to do with it apparently. The fact that a lot of the fuel has been reduced, in the surrounding areas will maybe help. Not that the grasses will burn, but they won't get near as hot. So it actually, the fact that we've reduced some of the fuel sources around town actually speaks to the problem being in the center of town. So we're at more risk now by these issues with trees over fireplaces and wooden fences against houses and a bunch of combustible material against properties, more now than ever. So.
I can give you a little insight on trees if you'd like for the fire hazard. Trees, there's two ways typically trees catch fire. One is from a ground fire moving up into the tree, which can be protected by clearing the ground out, limbing up the trees, 6 to 8 feet, so that a ground fire that moves through doesn't get into the branches of the tree and take the tree up. The other is a crowning fire, where it goes from crown to crown of the trees. And that's done by thinning the trees, and cutting out the dead material out of the trees so it won't carry the fire. So those are kind of the ways that you can protect your tree canopies without cutting the trees down.
Can I have a question, please? Wayne, I'm sorry. Can you answer Bill's question about pine trees? Are they,
Trees are pretty combustible.
That's what I thought.
Turpentine out of pine trees.
Turpentine.
Turpentine is made from pine trees, Bill. That's the natural pine.
I believe the concept is not to remove the trees, is to maintain a clearance. And if something is today not particularly combustible, just because you can do the pine needle test, doesn't mean in 3 months it's going to be in that same condition. However, if a clearance is maintained, at least there's a reasonable effort has been made to prevent fire should it envelop that tree from affecting the structure. This is a clearance aspect relative to the invasive and non-native species of trees, in particular fan palms and some types of eucalyptus and Monterey pines. It distorts and clouds the issue. We're looking at fire hardening. To be concerned about shade is, while beneficial in another conversation, it doesn't address this problem, which is this community lacks fire hardening. It lacks it. And you don't get anywhere by nuancing the issue to the point that you kind of go, gee, we haven't done anything, because that's in fact what's happened. We have to have some minimal, and this is what we've been charged, this board has been charged with the city council now the second time, to generate a list of simple recommendations, basic recommendations, which of course can be enhanced and made more complicated or more complex, but basic recommendations. And that's what we're trying to promulgate here, I think, today. And I think we're getting close at this point, because it's certainly my intention to produce a resolution for council at this meeting. Is everyone more or less in agreement with that? So, one more.
We have Betsy Sticks.
And who would that be, Cheryl?
Hi, everybody. Well, first, I just want to say thank you to everyone in this room for working so hard.
Excuse
yeah.
me, is there a microphone on?
Can you hear me now, Bill? Yeah. Good. Okay. Thank you. I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for being here, because there's nothing more important than our own safety. And we all know that. And every day is fire day at this point in our lives. So, and what I'm hearing is that we have to change behavior. And how do we change behavior? We change behavior through laws, ordinances, building ordinances, property maintenance ordinances, landscaping ordinances, and that, you know, and as you mentioned, Bob, you know, we used to not have car seats or seat belts. We could smoke inside. We didn't have to wear helmets. How do we change behavior? It's the law. So I really appreciate you making this list, and then we just got to do it. One sentence that rolls around in my head all the time: work from the home out, not from the forest in. So each one of us has to start right where we live. And Bob Roper's coming over to my house on Saturday to walk around the house and tell me what I need to do, which is, I'm so lucky, and that's got to happen at everybody's house. So you know, it would be a great business for a young person to start home hardening. You'd get call, you know, your phone would be ringing off the hook. So how do we find the people who are qualified to do that, and then get the word out? And to address your question, Tom, last week the City Council approved a 13-point plan, the Ojai Wildfire Resiliency Plan, and we are going to already approved some public workshops that will begin in the next couple months to get the word out there and the education out there. So a combination of education and changing the way we behave. And also, Reno, to speak to you, you know, I agree. Why reinvent the wheel when all this information is out there? And the list is great. As Wayne mentioned, what's the name of that group? The list that you and Bob gave me, which is very similar, that you just mentioned.
National Fire Protection Association.
Yes, yes. So let's coordinate with that and make sure that it's copacetic. That's it. So once again, thank you. And I know we all can do this. It's just about mobilizing and communicating and getting the word out there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, what, excuse me? Well,
We need to make a motion.
yeah, and are we adding these 3 items on then?
Sure.
Okay. In that case, then, and do we have, Cheryl, do you have the language, I guess, adequately for these 3 ads?
Yes, it should be fine. It's on video.
Okay, all right. So all right. So then at this point, within we need a motion for a resolution that incorporates these bullet points as well as the 3 ads. So.
Just gonna put that together. Cheryl?
Okay. So do we have a motion?
I make a motion that we forward this list with the ads to City Council for consideration, to put a date, change the appropriate codes, and adopt those codes that we don't have currently, and put a date to implement this thing and get this program started. That's all I can think of.
And when you say put a date?
Yeah, you know, the date was 4.5 years ago.
Yeah.
That was what the date was, to do this, 4.5 years ago. If you don't have a date to implement, we're never gonna start. They didn't put a date last time, we haven't started.
Right.
I think we need to have a date that the City Council will put this on the agenda and get it through. It doesn't matter what format. If we have 13 items if we have 13 items and they decide that they're going to tackle 3, I'm good with tackling anything. One thing. We haven't done one thing in 4.5 years. So I would be glad with, if we just went with the property maintenance and we cleared up all the garbage and all the loose wood and all the combustible trash, lumber stored. I mean, when we go around on city property, by the way, I'll just mention it so everybody can get it. Drive to Signal and Grant, and the city owns property. They own 2 lots there. And they cut down a tree years ago. And they laid all these logs out in this field to rot and to become little bonfires when embers come by, because they're so dry, they're dehydrated. You know, they'll go up. They're like paper mache. So when they get any combustibles, we have so many places that have got so much storage of fuel that they're never going to use, that we need to start getting rid of it. We need to stop dumping all these wood chips on the upper lot up above the maintenance yard across from the demonstration center. We're dumping tens of thousands of pounds of wood chips up there. They're just in enormous piles. And when the winds and the embers come, we're going to take that off. That's right up above our maintenance yard. That's where all of our equipment is. Not a good place to be pre-stocking flammables. And we're doing that throughout. And then one of these days, to make a couple of the other members of council happy, city council is going to have to address the big elephant in the room, which is the removal of the waste yard down on Baldwin Street because of the shot bore and not having the proper equipment to chop up the wood in a small enough area. So we're exporting our wood, some of it to Fillmore, but the rest, we have random landscape and maintenance people are just dumping chips randomly on every vacant lot they can find in the city. And that's one of the problems we have when we don't have a place to deposit or chip ourselves. And they're not going to pay the expense to go to Fillmore. So what we're doing is we're loading ourselves down. And this dynamic is what took out the Upper Ojai School. It was the mulch that caught on fire with the embers and blew up against the school, and it burned down that $10 million school. We are replicating exactly what we know isn't going to be beneficial to us, but yet we continue to do it. We need to stop. I understand mulch is important, but too much of it is just it's a catastrophic event waiting to happen. And I don't believe that they should be able to stockpiles for weeks, months, and years and never get around to spreading it out or using it as mulch. That's when it becomes really dry, tender, dehydrated, very dangerous. And we have those pockets. As I sent our code officer probably 20 or 30 or 40 pictures of houses with leaves and roofs and all these different properties and lots and dead trees everywhere. And I sent them to you too, Dale, so you have a copy of all of them. Yeah, there's quite a number.
Okay, but how does that modify the resolution? The motion.
It doesn't.
Okay. Okay. So at this point, I'm still looking for a motion in a second.
I'll second that.
That's not a resolution.
Yeah. Should we go with it?
That was a ramble.
Start. Okay. Start all over and just let's address a resolution regarding these 10 items and the 3 ads. Okay. Do I have a resolution to forward this to council with our recommendations to review and enact as they see fit?
I would just say that on the date, I understood that a specific date was part of the motion, and I'm not sure what the implications are that would impact, the actual date. But I think it's interesting that the county begins sending out these notices on 4/20. And I think Earth Day, people have a heightened sort of awareness and sensitivity. It may be good to sort of coordinate to the extent that maybe whatever we're trying to do is commensurate with what the county's currently doing. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, but the county, as was discussed here earlier, the county's still using June 1 for fire season. I think there's multiple fire agencies in the state of California that have gone on record as saying they don't think that's accurate anymore.
No, I agree with the mayor. Every day's fire day. I'm just saying we have to do something. We need a date
You
certain.
put in here, our fire season should start on the 1st of April, which means any notices
Oh, I
have
see,
to go out
okay.
a minimum of 30 days before that. That would be March 1,
Got it.
okay? So,
I just like the Earth Day play. It's kind of cool.
well,
And again, not just because it's cute, but because people's awareness is heightened at that time.
I agree.
People go out and they volunteer for the planet. People go out and do yard work.
well, you know.
It's a good time.
A second reminder can always go out on Earth Day, then but the issue at this point is not what might work for attention or focus, but actually what would work from a timely perspective in order to harden the community ahead of or consistent with fire season, the actual fire season, which, you know, once again, it's subject to a discussion as far as how long it lasts and whether it's all year or not. But at this point, we're just moving that notice date up approximately 6 or 7 weeks. So, and I don't think there's anything detrimental from an early notice and then if necessary a follow-up, because typically speaking, this is the sort of issue that does require at least a couple of notices for folks to be able to respond to it, because a lot of times the first notice is, okay, I'll get to this, and then they don't get to it, so.
Well, in the county program, they have a specific timeline within
Yes.
which the target has to comply, or it
Right.
becomes,
Right.
mandatory, which actually I kind of like, given the importance of what we're trying to do here, so.
Well, and I would agree with that as well, because obviously we've made a recommendation. One of the ads is the city to model a hazard reduction program after the Ventura County hazard reduction program. However, the implications of that also, once again, have to be, doesn't matter what gets adopted and how good everybody feels about it if nobody does it. And if there isn't a mechanism within the city governance to actually not only get the program, and whether it is done symbiotically or in coordination with another agency, the county fire, or whatever it is, it still is going to take some element of city government, city of Ojai government, to actually make it happen, and that has been lacking. So I don't want to burden it too much with too many finesses when there are when the big issue is whether it's going to happen at all. Okay, so
Chair, I'd make a suggestion that you go ahead and you go ahead and state the resolution, and then what we can do is we can
okay,
second and vote.
At this point, the Building Appeals Board has made is suggesting that Ojai City Council review for the, how many do we have here? Is this 13?
13 now, yeah.
13-item fire hardening recommendations, and I think that's it.
Chair, I have 14.
14?
Yeah.
Perfect. Amend that, please, to 14.
Can I just, I just want clarification.
Absolutely.
Okay. So from what I had, where it's the list that's in the agenda, or
Yes.
the item here. And then it's on an abridged version. It's implement this on city property, all city properties. Coordinate with Southern California Edison to develop a program to remove invasive species in their right-of-way. And the last one I understood was engage the community and educate the community.
Okay, I'll clarify that.
Okay.
The next one is the city to model a hazard reduction program after Ventura County hazard reduction program.
Okay, that's what I just want to make sure we
And
were
then
clear.
it's city to engage with and communicate to the community a fire hazard reduction program that council ultimately adopts.
Okay.
Okay? And you can take whatever my notes are here. If you
So
need.
that should be 13.
One.
If we're folding the wood chips
Well, no,
into
he
the
added,
other fuel.
that was the 14th one.
Oh, the city?
Was the, yes, the city
Got it.
applying a program to itself.
Understood. So it's
Okay?
the city modeling after the county, and what was the third one? Modeling after the county, applying the same to the city.
The engage with the community and communicate to the community the hazard reduction program that council finally adopts.
That's an item, and then you've got to
the
include
14th
SoCal
item
Edison.
is that, that SCE,
Yeah, SoCal
Southern
Edison.
California Edison, to remove all, they already have a program. All you gotta do is call them up. I mean, and say, okay, we got this situation. And if it winds up being something that's a larger, that takes more coordination, several crews, several days, several weeks, whatever, I'm sure they have a manager. I know they have a manager because I've spoken to a couple of them. At this point, all it is saying the city has a very serious concern, and they know obviously Edison's been working within the city and on the outskirts of the city. At this particular point, what are their plans relative to mitigation of invasives and fuel beneath their power lines throughout the city? So it's a comprehensive thing rather than just where they decided they had to move, replace equipment, which is what it's been so far, more or less. I mean, they came up Gridley twice last year. So, I think that's just a communication thing. So,
Okay, just
okay.
one more thing.
Sure.
I think we're forgetting about the one that's on the first page. That's why I think there's a disconnect. This is the fence.
Okay, see, that's the problem with bullet points is they don't have any numbers.
There's one on the front page of the.
That's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So that makes
Yes,
15.
okay. I just want to make sure we have the correct
Okay,
number. That's all.
15 points. That's part of the resolution is our 15-point recommendation list. Okay? So do I need to restate it or are we okay? Okay? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Fabulous. Can I get a roll call, please?
Ulrich,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Daddy,
Yes.
Rowley.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, fabulous. Now, at this point, I believe that, let's see here, we have the City Council Liaison report from the mayor.
Thank you. Well, I feel like I already let the cat out of the bag. The report is that on Tuesday, it was super exciting. I've worked closely with Bob Roper and Wayne, thank you, Wayne, and Matt Levere and several other fire experts to come together, and James Vega, to make this plan. And so we passed it, and of course, plans are always flexible, so of course it will change. James, the staff has already started on 7 of the 13 points, so that's great news. And we have a line on funding. So once that comes through, we will continue and get it done. So I encourage, I hope that all of you have read it, and if you haven't read it, please look at it, and we would love feedback. And once again, thank you for all of your work, because this is a crucial part of the plan. And I read today that 90% of homes burned down from embers. Is that correct? Okay, so clearly that's the number one priority for all of us in all of our homes. So start at home, and I will continue to communicate about that, and we'll have the workshops, as I said, Tom, so I hope you'll come and participate, and just get everybody on board so that it's just, You know, it's like the masks. We all got used to it, and now we're doing it. So that's what we just got to do. And I think everyone recognizes the dire aspect of this, so it's time to get to work and do it. So thank you again.
Thank you.
They will when Tahoe burns down next week.
Yeah, really. Okay. And then,
All those wood shake roofs?
Planning Commission report? Always the best dressed man in the room.
I respect my audience. Just kind of bouncing around, we, the Planning Commission, had a joint meeting with the City Council a week ago. And I believe we were tasked, the City Council agreed that we should go back and relook at the tree ordinance, at the landscape ordinance, and fuel management surely seems like an appropriate thing to put in one of those places, probably landscaping. When we talk about trigger events, we are about, I don't know, maybe Dale would know. How many houses are sold in the city every year? It's not a large number compared to, what are there, 2,500 houses in the city? Something like that.
Approximately, and about 200. It varies from year to year, but that's a rough number.
So if we are going by transfer and sale as a trigger event to enforce new rules, then it's going to take 10 years. On the other hand, there are, as Mr. Maynard pointed out, he favors when you're hardening, harden more than the addition. There is already language in another area that does just that, and I can testify when I had a remodel done on my home, there was earthquake hardening that was done to the entire 1930 structure and any additions since then, including the 2018 addition. I don't know where that language occurs, but you might consider that if you want to start talking about hardening, fire hardening, more than an addition. But we are still talking about 10 years to make all this stuff happen throughout the city. If we are serious about changing people's behavior, then I would submit that a different approach is required. I'm on the Ojai Valley Sanitary District Board, and we just reviewed our capacity charges for ADUs. And we made the revised charges retroactive. And so I just today signed 7 modifications of contracts that the district had with people that are actually lowering their bills, okay? Not you, but the city council could make requirements for fire hardening, if they're not already in the code and just not being enforced, they could be made retroactive. You could say, I don't care if you built your house in 1930, you still have to put a spark arrestor on it, on your chimney. Things of that sort. Typically, ordinances only regulate future behavior. And if it's going to take 10 years to clear up all this behavior, we're playing with fire. Thank you.
Chair Quillisi, before you run away, at the last meeting, I'm not sure where you were, we asked Tom how many permits we do, building permits. That's 350, so that's 550. So had we gone ahead and put this in place 4 years ago, we would have 2,400 homes retrofitted. Now, we didn't do anything, we have none. So again, we could have been up to 2,400. And if we keep at the same rate, in 4 years, we'll be at 2,400.
Well, I'm not sure where you get the 550 as a count for permits.
350 on permits.
350 on
That's
permits.
what Tom told
I mean, there are
us.
fence permits, there are deck permits,
Yes, there
all
are.
sorts of things. And unless you include with that, now that you're putting a fence around your property, you have to harden your house. If that does not become a part of the process, then we're still talking about 10 years.
And again, that's city council's prerogative.
Just, we have to keep that in mind.
Okay, very good, thank you. Do we have any other comments? Any questions? Okay, in that case, then I'm going to adjourn this Building Appeals Board at 6:15.
15 minutes late.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve, Tom. Permits won't require